I'm Allison Turner, 28, and tonight my life imploded over mashed potatoes and roast beef. After 12 years holding my tongue, I finally confronted my parents about the favoritism toward my younger sister Rachel. Their response? You can take the guest room, or move out, all because I questioned why Rachel was getting my childhood bedroom renovated while I slept on a pull-out couch. They expected me to just nod and accept it, like I had with everything else. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and said 4 words that changed everything. I choose option 3. Before I get into the full story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Family drama hits differently depending on where you grew up, right? If this story resonates with you at all, please hit that like button so others can find it too. Now, let me tell you how I went from dutiful daughter to family outcast in a single dinner conversation. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Turner family meant one thing above all else: responsibility. From the moment Rachel was born when I was 2, and then Ethan, a year after that, I was expected to be the example, the helper, the reasonable one. By the time I turned 10, I was basically a third parent in our household, watching my siblings while mom and dad worked late. That was the unspoken contract in our family. I would be mature beyond my years, and in return, I would receive, well, as it turns out, not much at all. My father, Richard Turner, built his accounting firm from the ground up. A self-made man who never let anyone forget it. 6'2", with salt and pepper hair that he kept meticulously trimmed, he ruled our house like it was an extension of his office, with the same rigid expectations and quarterly reviews. My mother, Catherine, had been his secretary before they married. She quit her job when I was born, but never quite stopped playing the role of the supportive assistant, always smoothing things over, always making excuses for his harshness. Then there was Rachel. From the moment she was born, she seemed to have a special place in our parents' hearts that neither Ethan nor I could access. She had Dad's business acumen and Mom's delicate features. She could charm her way out of chores and into extended curfews with a bat of her eyelashes, while I was grounded for being 5 minutes late. Ethan existed somewhere in the middle, occasionally receiving scraps of attention but mostly left to his own devices unless he was in trouble. I never planned on coming back home after college. I had a marketing degree, a job at a promising startup, and an apartment in the city with my boyfriend James. We got married when I was 25, and for a while, life seemed perfect. But then came 2023. The tech bubble burst, I lost my job, and within a month, I discovered James had been cheating with a coworker for over a year. The divorce was quick but devastating, leaving me emotionally drained and financially compromised. You can come home until you get back on your feet, my mother had offered over the phone. 3 or 4 months, tops, just to save up for a security deposit on a new place. That was 11 months ago. What was supposed to be a brief pit stop had turned into an extended stay in purgatory. I slept on a pull-out couch in what had become the family room since my childhood bedroom had been converted into a home office for my father years ago. I paid $600 a month in rent to my parents, which they insisted was teaching me financial responsibility, despite the fact that I was nearly 30 and had been managing my own finances since college. Rachel, on the other hand, had moved back in 6 months after me, claiming she needed to find herself after quitting her 3rd job in 2 years. She paid no rent. Her laundry was done for her. Her meals were cooked to her specifications. When she announced she wanted to start a fashion blog, our parents bought her a $2,000 camera and lighting setup. The week before the fateful dinner, I had accidentally discovered a bank statement while looking for a stamp in my father's desk. It showed regular transfers of $600 into an account labeled Rachel House Fund. The exact amount of my monthly rent. I felt physically ill looking at it, realizing my own money was being funneled directly to my sister while I saved pennies for my escape. The tension had been building for weeks. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, folding away the couch bed before anyone came downstairs, trying to erase my existence from the family room. Every night I lay awake listening to Rachel's music through the wall, wondering how I had become so invisible in my own family home. "You seem distant lately," my mother commented the morning of the dinner as I poured coffee into a travel mug. "Your father thinks you're being ungrateful." "Ungrateful for what exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "For everything we've done for you, Allison. Taking you in during your time of need." I nearly laughed. "I pay rent, Mom. It's not charity." She pursed her lips in that way she always did when I wasn't playing by the rules. Family helps family. You'll understand when you have children of your own. The family dinner that night was my mother's attempt at bringing us all together again. She had prepared roast beef, mashed potatoes, and green bean casserole, the same meal she made for every family occasion. We sat in our assigned seats, the ones we'd had since childhood. Dad at the head, Mom at the foot, Rachel and me on one side, Ethan across from us. A perfect nuclear family tableau, if you ignored the frostiness in the air. "Your father and I have some exciting news," my mother announced as she passed the mashed potatoes around the table. Her voice had that artificial cheeriness she used when trying to manufacture family harmony. "We've decided to do some renovations upstairs." My father nodded, cutting his roast beef into perfectly symmetrical pieces. "The home office is being moved downstairs, and we're turning it back into a bedroom." "That's my old bedroom," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "It was your bedroom," my father corrected. Past tense. Rachel smiled across the table, fork twirling in her fingers. "They're letting me design it however I want. I'm thinking a blush pink accent wall, and maybe converting part of it into a filming space for my blog." I put my fork down, food suddenly tasting like cardboard. "So you're renovating a bedroom for Rachel while I sleep on a pull-out couch in the family room?" "The family room that everyone walks through starting at 6 a.m.? My mother's smile faltered. "Allison, you said yourself this arrangement was temporary. Rachel needs a proper space for her business venture." "Her third business venture this year," I corrected. "And I'm paying rent. She isn't." "That's different," my father said dismissively. "Your situation and hers are completely different." "How? How are they different, Dad?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like blatant favoritism. The same favoritism I've dealt with my entire life." The table went silent. This wasn't how things worked in the Turner household. Problems weren't addressed. They were swept under the rug or handled with passive-aggressive comments over holiday dinners years later. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately," my mother said softly, "but this attitude isn't helping anyone." "Attitude?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it when I finally stand up for myself? Do you have any idea what it's like to come back home after everything I've been through and be treated like a second-class citizen in my own family?" Rachel rolled her eyes dramatically. "Here we go with the victim routine again." "Shut up, Rachel," Ethan said suddenly, surprising everyone. My quiet, conflict-avoidant brother rarely spoke up at family gatherings. "Allie's right. You get everything handed to you on a silver platter while she works her ass off and gets criticized for breathing too loudly." "That's enough." My father's voice boomed across the table. "If you're so unhappy with the arrangements in this house, Allison, you have options. You can take the guest room in the basement, or you can move out. Those are your choices." "The guest room?" I repeated incredulously. "The one with the water damage and no windows? While Rachel gets a custom renovation?" "I've earned my parents' support," Rachel snapped. "I actually appreciate what they do for me instead of complaining constantly." "What have you earned exactly?" I asked her directly. "The job Dad got you that you quit after 3 months? The car they bought you that you crashed? The college tuition they paid that you wasted changing majors 4 times? That's enough." My father slammed his hand on the table. "You will not speak to your sister that way in this house." "Why not?" "She speaks to me however she wants. You all do. Do you know what I found last week? The bank statement showing my rent money going directly into Rachel's house fund. You're literally taking my money and giving it to her." My mother gasped. "You were snooping through your father's desk?" "I was looking for a stamp. But that's what you focus on? Not the fact that you've been lying to me for months?" "It's our money once you give it to us," my father said coldly. "We can allocate it however we see fit. Then call it what it is. Don't pretend it's teaching me responsibility when you're just funneling it to your favorite child." "I've had enough of this disrespect." My father stood up. napkin thrown onto his plate. You have two choices, Allison. Guest room or moving out. Decide now. I looked around the table. My mother's tearful manipulation, my father's rigid anger, Rachel's smug satisfaction. Only Ethan met my eyes with something like understanding. In that moment, something broke inside me. Something that had been barely holding together for years. I stood up, grabbing my car keys from my pocket. I choose option 3, I said, the calm in my voice surprising even me. There is no option 3, my father said. Yes, there is. I'm leaving tonight, and I'm done being the family scapegoat. You can all figure out who to blame for everything without me around. I walked out to the soundtrack of my mother's dramatic sobs, my father's angry demands to come back and discuss this like adults, and Rachel's performative comfort of our mother. Only Ethan remained silent, giving me a small nod as I closed the door behind me. If this family drama sounds familiar, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice like this with your own family? Let me know in the comments as I continue my story about what happened next. The first night away from my family home was both terrifying and strangely peaceful. I checked into a budget inn on the edge of town, the kind of place with scratchy floral bedspreads and HBO that still required actual buttons on the TV. It was the first time in nearly a year that I had complete privacy, and despite everything, that fact alone felt like luxury. My phone buzzed constantly for the first 2 hours. Text messages poured in. Mom, Allison Marie Turner, come home right now. Your father is furious and I'm worried sick. This is so immature. Dad, your behavior tonight was completely unacceptable. You owe your mother an apology. Call immediately. Rachel. Way to ruin dinner with your jealousy issues. Mom is crying because of you. Again. I turned my phone to silent and lay on the bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling. What had I just done? Where would I go? My savings account held just under $3,000, hardly enough for first and last month's rent plus security deposit in our expensive suburb. I had been applying for jobs for months, with only 2 interviews that went nowhere. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a call from Ethan. I hesitated before answering. Allie, are you okay? His voice was hushed, like he was hiding somewhere to make the call. I'm at a motel. I'm fine. Just processing. Listen, there's stuff you need to know. He paused, and I heard a door closing. I found your journal in Dad's desk drawer last week. The one you write your therapy notes in. My stomach dropped. What? They've been reading it. I think that's why they've been acting weirder lately. They know you've been discussing them in therapy. I felt violated in a way I couldn't articulate. Those journal pages contained my most vulnerable thoughts, my therapist's suggestions, my raw feelings about my family dynamics, the idea that they had been passing it around, reading it, judging it. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. There's more, Ethan continued when I returned to the phone. I overheard Mom and Dad talking about your rent money. They've been putting it all toward Rachel's house fund. She's getting a down payment for her birthday next month. I know. I found the bank statement. No, you don't understand. They've been saving for her for years. That account has over $40,000 in it. They never saved anything for us. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 40,000? And Dad got you blacklisted from Carson Marketing. What are you talking about? Carson Marketing had been my dream job, a position I was perfectly qualified for. I had made it to the final round of interviews before being suddenly rejected without explanation. His golf buddy is on their board. Dad told him you were emotionally unstable after your divorce and not ready for the responsibility. The hits kept coming, each revelation worse than the last. By the time I hung up with Ethan, I was shaking with a mixture of rage and despair. My parents hadn't just been playing favorites. They had been actively sabotaging my attempts to get back on my feet while simultaneously criticizing me for not making progress. The next morning, my old college roommate Melissa called. Ethan had apparently reached out to her. I have a spare bedroom, she said, without preamble. It's yours for as long as you need it. No rent for the first month while you figure things out. I burst into tears at her generosity, unable to form words. That bad, huh? She asked gently. Worse than I even realized, I managed to say between sobs. That afternoon, I checked my bank account and discovered another shock. The balance was nearly $1,000 less than it should have been. I scrolled through recent transactions, finding withdrawals I had never made. Someone had been siphoning money from my account in small amounts, easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention. The only other person with access to my account information? My mother, who had helped me set up a new account at their bank when I moved back home. By the time I arrived at Melissa's apartment, I felt like I was waking up from a decades-long fog. How had I not seen what was happening? How had I allowed myself to be manipulated and controlled for so long? The weight of it all crashed down, and I spent my first night in her spare room curled into a ball, alternating between tears and a strange, almost hysterical laughter at the absurdity of it all. "You're not crazy," Melissa assured me as she sat on the edge of the bed, offering me tea and tissues. "What they've been doing is emotional abuse. And financial abuse, too. From the sounds of it, they're my parents," I whispered. "They're supposed to love me." "They probably do, in their own twisted way," she replied. "But love shouldn't hurt like this." I thought about all the moments over the years when I had pushed down my feelings, made myself smaller, accepted less than I deserved, all in the name of keeping the peace, of being the good daughter. What had it gotten me? A pull-out couch and stolen money, a sabotaged career and violated privacy. That night, I made a decision. I would not be going back. Not to the guest room, not to the pull-out couch, not to the role of family scapegoat. Whatever came next would be on my terms. For anyone who's ever felt like they were drowning in family expectations or walking on eggshells in their own home, I see you. The next part of my story gets even more intense as I discovered just how deep the betrayal went. Stay with me. Moving in with Melissa gave me something I hadn't had in nearly a year. Breathing room. Her spare bedroom was small but mine, with a door I could close, privacy I could count on, and a friend who respected boundaries. The contrast with my family's situation was stark and illuminating. "We need to figure out exactly what happened with your money," Melissa said over coffee the morning after I moved in. A financial analyst by profession, she had a methodical approach to problems that balanced my emotional turmoil. I spent the next week gathering every financial document I could access. Bank statements, credit reports, tax returns. I created a spreadsheet tracking every dollar I had earned and spent since moving back home. The results were disturbing. Beyond the rent money that had gone to Rachel's house fund, there were numerous small withdrawals from my account that I couldn't account for, totaling nearly $4,200 over 11 months. My mother had also opened a credit card in my name with a balance of over $2,000, mostly charges at department stores and restaurants I never visited. "This is identity theft," Melissa pointed out. "It doesn't matter that she's your mother. It's a crime." I also discovered several missing items when I inventoried my possessions. My grandmother's pearl earrings, which I'd kept in a small jewelry box, were gone. So was the first edition book a college professor had gifted me, and an expensive watch from my ex-husband that I'd planned to sell. Meanwhile, I began weekly sessions with my therapist, Dr. Bennett, who helped me understand the family dynamic I'd been trapped in. "What you're describing sounds like a classic narcissistic family system," she explained during one session. "Your father as the main narcissist, your mother as his enabler, Rachel as the golden child, you as the scapegoat, and Ethan as the lost child. It's not about who you are, it's about the roles you were assigned." She recommended books on the subject, and each one felt like reading my own biography. The patterns were so clear now. The way my accomplishments were minimized while Rachel's were celebrated, how I was held to impossible standards while she was forgiven everything, how Ethan had learned to make himself invisible to avoid conflict. "The hardest part to accept," Dr. Bennett said gently, "is that this won't change. Your parents and sister are unlikely to ever recognize the dynamic or their role in it. Your only power is in how you respond." I decided to reach out to my mother's sister, Aunt Diane, who had been estranged from our family for as long as I could remember. My parents had always dismissed her as troubled and jealous, but given everything I was learning, I wondered if there was another side to the story. Allison? Her voice was tentative when she answered my call. I never thought I'd hear from you. I'm trying to understand some things about our family, I explained cautiously. I thought you might have a different perspective. What followed was a 3-hour conversation that rewrote my understanding of my family history. According to Aunt Diane, my father had systematically isolated my mother from her family after their marriage, controlling their finances and creating the same golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic between my mother and Diane that would later be replicated with Rachel and me. Your grandfather left us both equal inheritances, she revealed. But Richard convinced Catherine to invest hers in his business. When the business succeeded, he claimed all the credit and all the profits. She never saw a penny of her inheritance again. She also told me about a family trust that my maternal grandfather had established for all his grandchildren, meant to be distributed when we turned 30 or bought our first home, whichever came first. I had never heard of this trust. Despite being only 2 years from my 30th birthday, there should be about $25,000 for each grandchild, Diane explained. Your mother is one of the trustees. She would have to sign off on any distributions. Armed with this information, I consulted with a lawyer specializing in financial abuse cases. The consultation was free, and her advice was clear. You have several options, Lisa Harmon explained. We can pursue criminal charges for the identity theft and financial fraud, or we can handle it civilly with a demand letter. The family trust is a separate issue, but if you're a named beneficiary, you have a right to information about it. While I was deciding how to proceed legally, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be Walter Griffin, my father's longtime friend and the board member at Carson Marketing, who had supposedly helped blacklist me. I want you to know I had no idea what was going on, he said, sounding genuinely distressed. Your father told me you had asked him to quietly withdraw your application because you weren't ready. I only found out the truth yesterday when your brother reached out. Ethan, my quiet, conflict-avoidant brother, was quietly becoming my strongest ally. He had moved out of our parents' house the week after I left, taking a small apartment near his job. He had also been doing his own investigation, finding documents and overhearing conversations that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. They've been lying about everything, he told me during one of our now regular coffee meetings. Remember how they claimed to have paid for Rachel's entire college tuition out of pocket? I found loan documents. They took out Parent Plus loans for her that they're still paying off, while telling us both we needed to be financially independent. Each discovery was another piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. The picture that emerged was of a family built on lies, manipulation, and profound inequality, all carefully concealed behind the facade of a successful, loving household. The final confirmation came when I received a call from an old family friend, Mrs. Peterson, who had been like a second mother to me growing up. I've been so worried about you, she said. Your mother told everyone you had a nervous breakdown after your divorce, and they had to take you in. She's been collecting money from church members for your treatment. I was speechless. Not only had they stolen from me directly, but they had also been using my situation to collect sympathy and possibly money from our community, under false pretenses. That night, I sat in Melissa's living room, surrounded by papers, photos, and notes. The evidence of decades of manipulation laid bare. The girl who had left her parents' house that night after dinner barely recognized the family system she had been part of for 28 years. Everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my family relationships, even my own personality, had to be reevaluated in light of what I now understood. What are you going to do? Melissa asked, looking at the chaos of documents spread around us. I'm going to take my life back, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. One piece at a time. If you've ever had that moment of clarity when you suddenly see through family manipulation, you know how earth-shattering it can be. I'd love to hear if anything in my story has resonated with your experiences. Has anyone else discovered financial deception from family members? Next, I'll share how I confronted my parents with what I'd learned. The difference between reacting and responding is strategy. For years, I had reacted to my family's treatment, either by accepting it or with brief, ineffective rebellions. Now, I would respond with purpose and planning. My first priority was securing my finances. I opened new accounts at a different bank, froze my credit, and set up fraud alerts. I filed a police report about the identity theft, listing my mother as the perpetrator. The officer taking the report looked uncomfortable, but as he noted, family members are actually the most common perpetrators of identity theft. Next came the recovery of my remaining possessions from my parents' house. Melissa and I planned the retrieval carefully, choosing a time when both my parents would be at work, but Rachel might be home. I wanted a witness to our interaction, but not the full confrontation with my parents yet. That would come later, when I was ready. Rachel answered the door in yoga pants and a messy bun, looking annoyed at the interruption. Her expression changed to shock when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Mom and Dad are still furious with you." "I'm getting my things," I replied calmly. "This is Melissa. She's here as my witness. You can stay or leave, but we're coming in either way." I had already texted Ethan to let him know my plan, and he had provided me with the location of my missing jewelry and books, which had been moved to my mother's dresser drawer and my father's bookshelf, respectively. As we moved through the house, Rachel followed, alternating between hostile silence and passive-aggressive comments. "You've really hurt Mom, you know. She's been crying for days." I continued packing without responding. "Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown, that we need to be patient with you." I placed my grandmother's earrings in my bag, noting Rachel's eyes widening as she recognized them. "Those are Mom's earrings," she protested. "No, they're Grandma Turner's earrings that she left specifically to me, the ones that have been in my jewelry box for years until someone moved them." We proceeded to my former sleeping area in the family room, where I gathered clothes and personal items. When we reached the basement to collect some stored boxes, Rachel's facade cracked. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just be happy for me for once?" I paused, really looking at my sister. Behind the entitlement and bravado, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Fear. Rachel had been so thoroughly conditioned to her role that she didn't know who she was outside of being the golden child. "I was happy for you, Rachel. For years. Every time you got something I didn't. Every time you were forgiven when I would have been punished. Every time Mom and Dad celebrated your smallest effort while ignoring my achievements, I still smiled and congratulated you." "That's not true," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is true, and someday you might realize that being the favorite isn't actually a gift. They don't love you for who you are. They love the reflection of themselves they see in you. And the minute you step out of that reflection, you'll find yourself where I've been all along." Something shifted in her expression, a momentary glimpse of recognition before the defenses slammed back into place. "Whatever, you've always been dramatic. Take your stuff and go." As we were leaving, my mother pulled into the driveway, returning early from her volunteer work. Her face registered shock, then quickly assembled into a mask of maternal concern. "Allison, thank God you're home. We've been so worried." She rushed toward me with outstretched arms, but I stepped back. "I'm not staying. I came for my belongings." Her expression hardened. "So that's it? You're throwing away your family over a bedroom?" "This was never about a bedroom, Mom. This was about 28 years of being treated like I matter less than Rachel. It's about you stealing money from my account and opening credit cards in my name. It's about Dad sabotaging my job prospects while criticizing me for not finding work. That's ridiculous. We've done everything for you. We took you in when your marriage failed, and charged me rent that you funneled to Rachel's house fund, and read my private therapy journal, and lied to our entire community about my mental health to get sympathy and possibly money." She blanched at the last accusation. "Who have you been talking to?" "Everyone, Mom. I've been talking to everyone. Aunt Diane, Mrs. Peterson, Walter Griffin. Even your bank manager was quite interested to hear about the withdrawals from my account that I never authorized." She changed tactics, tears filling her eyes. "I don't know why you're trying to hurt us like this. After everything we've done for you." "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect myself. You'll be receiving a letter from my lawyer about the identity theft and the unauthorized withdrawals. I'm also requesting information about Grandpa's trust fund as a named beneficiary. The mention of the trust fund drained the color from her face. Who told you about that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that I know, and I'm done being manipulated and stolen from. As we drove away, Melissa glanced at me. Are you okay? I considered the question carefully. No. But I think I will be. Over the next few weeks, I executed the remainder of my plan. My lawyer sent formal letters regarding the financial fraud and trust fund. I applied for jobs without my father's interference, securing a position at a smaller marketing firm with growth potential. I found an affordable apartment with a roommate, signed a lease, and began the process of building a life entirely separate from my family's influence. Ethan decided to move to a city 2 hours away, accepting a job offer he had previously declined because our parents had convinced him it was too far from family. We spoke nearly every day, strengthening a sibling bond that had been deliberately weakened by our parents' triangulation tactics. My parents' response to my actions was predictable. First came angry denials, then tearful pleas for reconciliation, then attempts to use extended family members as flying monkeys to guilt me into returning to the fold. When none of those worked, they began a smear campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable and turning my brother against them. Some family friends believed them. Others, who had seen glimpses of the dynamic over the years, reached out to offer support. The family system was cracking open, decades of carefully maintained appearances giving way to revealed truth. Throughout this period, I maintained strict boundaries. I communicated only through my lawyer regarding financial matters. I blocked my parents and Rachel on social media and my phone. I declined family gatherings and holiday invitations, choosing instead to create new traditions with Ethan, Melissa, and other supportive friends. Boundaries aren't about punishing them, Dr. Bennett reminded me during therapy. They're about protecting yourself. You get to decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want going forward. The most unexpected development during this time was a text message from Rachel, sent late one night about a month after our confrontation. What if you're right about everything? I didn't respond immediately, unsure if it was genuine or another manipulation tactic. But it planted a seed of possibility that even the golden child might eventually see through the facade. 6 weeks after leaving my parents' house, I received notification that my portion of the trust fund, approximately $27,000, would be released to me within 30 days. My mother, as trustee, had apparently decided not to fight that battle in court, where family financial matters would become public record. With each step toward independence, the fog of gaslighting and manipulation lifted further. I began to recognize strengths in myself I had been conditioned to view as flaws: my independence, my questioning nature, my refusal to accept unfair treatment. The very qualities that had made me the family scapegoat were the ones helping me build a healthier life. I kept thinking back to that moment at the dinner table, when my father had presented what he thought was an impossible choice: accept inferior treatment or leave with nothing. He never considered that I might create a third option entirely on my own terms. Have you ever had to create your own option 3 when faced with an impossible situation? I'm curious how others have navigated family ultimatums. In the next part of my story, I'll share how a major health crisis in the family tested my new boundaries in ways I never expected. 3 months after I left my parents' house, I was settling into my new normal. My job at Rivera Marketing was going well. My apartment with a roommate was small but comfortable, and therapy was helping me process the complex grief of losing my family while they were still very much alive. I had just received my trust fund money, using it to pay off the fraudulent credit card, build an emergency fund, and treat myself to a few small items that symbolized my independence. Then came the phone call that changed everything again. "Allie?" Ethan's voice was shaky on the line. "Dad had a heart attack. He's in the hospital." My immediate reaction surprised me. Despite everything, my first instinct was concern, followed quickly by guilt. Was the stress of our estrangement a contributing factor? Then came the practical questions. What did this mean for my boundaries? Did a health crisis override my need for protection from their manipulation? Mom's been calling me nonstop, Ethan continued. She wants us both there. Says we need to come together as a family in this difficult time. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm driving in tomorrow. But Allie, I don't think you should. Why not? Because nothing's changed except the circumstances. Dad's condition isn't critical. He's stable, and he'll recover. This feels like Mom trying to use the situation to pull us back in. I spoke with Dr. Bennett in an emergency session that evening, wrestling with the complex emotions the situation brought up. Family health crises are often when established dynamics become most intense, she explained. They can be genuine opportunities for connection, or they can be manipulation tools. The question is, what does your gut tell you about this specific situation? I thought about it carefully, that I should send flowers and a card, but maintain my physical distance for now. I sent an elaborate flower arrangement to my father's hospital room with a simple card. Wishing you a speedy recovery. Allison. I also called the hospital daily for updates on his condition, which was indeed improving rapidly. 3 days after his admission, I received a text from Rachel. Dad keeps asking why you're not here. Mom says you don't care if he lives or dies. An hour later, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize, circumventing my blocks. I answered, not realizing it was her. Allison Marie Turner, she began, her voice thick with tears. Your father could have died, and you couldn't even be bothered to visit. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Mom, I've called the hospital every day. I sent flowers. Dad's condition is stable. That's not the same as being here. Rachel has been by his side day and night. Even Ethan came home. I'm glad they're able to be there, I said carefully. But my presence would create stress for everyone, including Dad. That's not helpful for his recovery. This is just more of your selfishness. I didn't raise you to abandon your family when they need you. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry Dad is unwell. I truly am. But a health crisis doesn't erase the past or change the dynamics that made it necessary for me to create distance. If you don't come to the hospital today, don't bother coming at all. Your father may never forgive you for this. It was the same ultimatum in different packaging. Comply with their demands or be cast out. The difference was that now, being cast out wasn't a threat, but a status I had chosen for my own well-being. I understand that's how you feel. Please give Dad my best wishes for his recovery. I hung up, hands shaking but resolve intact. Within minutes, my phone exploded with texts from extended family members who had apparently been briefed on my abandonment of the family during a crisis. What happened next was unexpected. Later that evening, I received a call from my father's hospital room. It was Ethan. Dad wants to talk to you, he said quietly, and before I could respond, I heard my father's voice, weaker than normal but still commanding. Allison, he said, and I braced myself for anger or guilt trips. Instead, he cleared his throat awkwardly. Thank you for the flowers. They're very nice. You're welcome, Dad. I'm glad you're feeling better. A long pause followed, filled with the beeping of hospital equipment. Your mother tells me you're being stubborn about visiting. I thought it would be less stressful for everyone if I gave you space to recover. Another long pause. Walter Griffin came to visit yesterday. He said some things about misunderstandings between us. About Carson marketing. My heart raced. Was this leading to an acknowledgement? An apology? I want you to know, he continued, that whatever you think happened, my intentions were always to protect you. You weren't ready for that position after everything with James. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an admission. It was a justification wrapped in the guise of paternal concern. Dad, you lied to Walter about me withdrawing my application. You actively prevented me from getting a job I was qualified for, while simultaneously criticizing me for not finding work. That's your perspective, he said, his voice hardening slightly. But I'm your father. I know what's best for you better than you do. And there it was, the fundamental belief at the core of our dysfunctional family, that my parents' judgment superseded my own autonomy, even as an adult approaching 30. I hope you feel better soon, Dad, I said, choosing not to engage further. I need to go now. The heart attack aftermath revealed something important. Crisis didn't change the underlying dynamic. If anything, it intensified it, with my parents using the situation to demand compliance and dispense guilt when their demands weren't met. A week later, with my father home from the hospital and recovering well, I received an email from his personal address. The subject line read, "Family Meeting, Important." The body of the email explained that he wanted to clear the air and move past this unpleasantness with a family dinner at their house the following Sunday. I showed the email to Dr. Bennett during our session. "What do you think this is about?" I asked her. "It could be several things," she replied thoughtfully. "A genuine attempt at reconciliation, though that seems unlikely given what you've told me. More likely, it's an attempt to regain control of the narrative and re-establish the dynamic they're comfortable with. Should I go? That depends on what you want from this interaction and whether you feel strong enough in your boundaries to withstand potential manipulation." After careful consideration, I decided to attend, but with conditions. I emailed my father back. "I'm willing to meet, but not at your house. I suggest the private room at Riverside Cafe. I will be bringing a support person with me. If these terms aren't acceptable, we can postpone until you're open to them." To my surprise, he agreed, though he insisted it be family only, no outsiders. We compromised on meeting in a public place without additional support people, but with the understanding that I could leave at any time. The meeting, as it turned out, wasn't about reconciliation at all. It was about the family trust. "Your grandfather's trust has a provision we haven't discussed," my father explained stiffly, as we sat around a table at the cafe. "It requires unanimous agreement from all beneficiaries before any individual distribution can be made." "What does that mean exactly?" Ethan asked. "It means," my mother interjected, "that unless all three of you agree, none of you can access your portion until you turn 30. I looked at Rachel, who was examining her manicure with elaborate disinterest. "And let me guess, Rachel needs her portion now?" "For the down payment on her house," my father confirmed. "The one we've been saving for." "The one you've been using my rent money to save for," I corrected. "Water under the bridge," he waved dismissively. "The point is, we need you both to sign these papers agreeing to an early distribution for Rachel." I almost laughed at the audacity. After everything that had happened, they had arranged this meeting not to repair our relationship, but to secure my signature for Rachel's benefit. "What happens if we don't sign?" Ethan asked. "Then Rachel loses the house she's been counting on, and you both prove how selfish you really are," my mother said, tears already forming. "After everything your father's been through, classic manipulation, using the health crisis, guilt, and accusations of selfishness to achieve compliance. 6 months ago, it would have worked. I would have signed just to keep the peace, to prove I wasn't the villain they painted me to be. But I wasn't that person anymore." "No," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" my father demanded. "I mean I'm not signing. Rachel can wait until she's 30, just like Ethan and I were apparently expected to do." "You can't do this," Rachel hissed. "I've already put in an offer on the house." "You put in an offer without securing financing first? That seems irresponsible." "This is exactly the kind of spiteful behavior that's torn this family apart," my mother accused. "No. What tore this family apart was decades of favoritism, manipulation, and financial abuse," I corrected. "And this meeting is just more of the same. You didn't invite us here to reconcile. You invited us here to use us." I stood up, gathering my purse. "When you're ready to acknowledge what you've done and make genuine amends, I'm open to that conversation. Until then, I'll see you at Rachel's 30th birthday, when she can access her trust fund legally, without my signature." As I walked out, Ethan followed, leaving our parents and Rachel sitting in stunned silence. Outside in the parking lot, he gave me a high five, something we hadn't done since we were kids. "I'm not signing either," he said with a grin. "Option 3, all the way." For those who have been following my story, have you ever had to stand firm in a boundary with family, even when it was painted as selfish? In the next part, I'll share how this confrontation led to unexpected developments within our family system. The 6 months following the failed family meeting brought changes I couldn't have anticipated. Standing firm in my boundaries didn't result in more family chaos as I'd feared, but rather in a strange new equilibrium. Like a mobile that rebalances after a piece is removed, the family system adjusted to my absence, revealing patterns and creating openings for growth I hadn't thought possible. 2 weeks after our meeting, I received an unexpected visit at my apartment from Rachel. She stood awkwardly at my door in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, clutching her Louis Vuitton purse like a shield. "Can we talk?" she asked, her usual confidence notably absent. I invited her in, curious but cautious. We sat at my small kitchen table, the IKEA placemats, a stark contrast to our mother's fine china. "I lost the house," she began, staring into the mug of tea I'd offered. "The sellers accepted another offer when my financing fell through." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I genuinely meant it. "No, you're not," she snapped, a flash of the old Rachel emerging. Then she sighed, deflating again. "And maybe you shouldn't be. Maybe I didn't deserve that house." What followed was a conversation unlike any we'd ever had. Without our parents' presence mediating our interaction, maintaining the prescribed dynamics, we spoke directly and honestly for perhaps the first time as adults. "I always thought you had it so easy," I admitted. "Everything handed to you while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition." "And I always thought you were the lucky one," she replied, surprising me. "Mom and Dad expected perfection from me. At least they left you alone." "They didn't leave me alone, Rachel. They criticized everything I did. It just happened out of your sight." She nodded slowly. "I'm starting to see that. Since you left, it's like they needed a new scapegoat. And with Ethan gone too, guess who got the job?" She described how our parents had begun finding fault with her decisions, questioning her judgment, even criticizing her appearance, now that she was the only child left to focus on. The golden pedestal was revealed to be as much a trap as the scapegoat role had been a burden. "I don't know who I am without their approval," she admitted, tears forming. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what they wanted." "Join the club," I said with a wry smile. We didn't solve decades of programmed rivalry in one afternoon, but we cracked open a door that had been sealed shut by our parents' manipulation. We agreed to meet occasionally, just the two of us, away from family pressure and expectations. Meanwhile, my legal actions regarding the financial fraud had progressed. Rather than risk public exposure in court, my parents agreed to a settlement, repaying the money taken from my account plus interest and assuming full responsibility for the fraudulent credit card. The agreement included a non-disclosure clause, their lawyers' attempt to keep the family's dirty laundry private. My career at Rivera Marketing flourished once I was free from my father's sabotage and my own diminished self-confidence. 6 months into the job, I received a promotion to account manager with a significant salary increase. For the first time, I could afford a small apartment without roommates, a tangible symbol of my independence. Ethan thrived as well in his new city and job, calling regularly to share successes and challenges. We established a tradition of monthly weekend visits, alternating between our locations, rebuilding the sibling relationship that had been stunted by our family dynamic. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked during one of these visits as we hiked through a state park near his apartment. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not who they actually are, but who I wish they could be. I miss the idea of having parents who celebrate my success instead of feeling threatened by it." "Yeah," he nodded. "I keep waiting to stop, hoping they'll change. Dr. Bennett says that's normal. That grief for the family you deserved but never had can last a lifetime." As autumn approached, bringing with it the inevitable questions about holiday plans, I received a formal-looking letter from a meditation center 2 hours from the city. Inside was a note from my father, written on personal stationery rather than his business letterhead. "Allison, I have been attending a weekly men's group at the Riverside Meditation Center for the past 2 months, at my doctor's recommendation following the heart attack. During our discussions about family relationships, I have been challenged to examine my role as a father and the dynamics I created in our home. While I don't agree with all your accusations, I am beginning to understand that my actions may have contributed to your distress. I am working to become more aware of these patterns. If you are willing, the center offers a family reconciliation program. Your mother and I would like to participate in this with you and your siblings. There is no pressure to respond immediately, but I wanted to extend the invitation. Regards, Dad. It wasn't an apology, not really. There was no specific acknowledgement of the financial fraud, the sabotage, or the decades of favoritism, but it was something I had never seen from my father before. An admission, however limited, that he might have contributed to the problem. I shared the letter with Dr. Bennett, who cautioned against excessive optimism. This could be the beginning of genuine change, she acknowledged, or it could be a more sophisticated attempt at regaining control. Narcissistic parents sometimes adapt their tactics when old ones stop working. How do I tell the difference? By proceeding cautiously. True change is demonstrated through consistent behavior over time, not promises or words. I decided to respond to my father with cautious openness. Dad, I appreciate your letter and the effort it represents. I'm not ready for the reconciliation program yet, but I am open to continued written communication as a first step. If you're serious about understanding the family dynamics, I would recommend the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents as a starting point. Allison. What followed was a series of carefully worded letters exchanged over several months. My father, a man who had communicated primarily through directives and judgments my entire life, struggled visibly with this new mode of interaction. His early letters were stiff, defensive, filled with justifications thinly disguised as explanations. But gradually, prompted perhaps by his meditation group or simply by my continued firm boundaries, small admissions began to appear. Looking back, I can see that we may have placed unfair expectations on you from an early age. Your mother and I have discussed your allegations regarding the financial matters, and we recognize that our handling of the situation was inappropriate. They weren't the full-throated apologies I might have once craved, but they were acknowledgments I had never expected to receive. My mother's approach to reconciliation took a different form. After months of tearful voicemails and guilt-laden texts that I didn't respond to, she showed up at one of my marketing firm's public events, hanging back until the crowd had dispersed. "You look well," she said, her eyes taking in my professional attire and confident posture. "The job seems to suit you." "It does," I agreed. "I'm good at it." We had coffee afterward, an awkward affair filled with her attempts to revert to old patterns, asking invasive questions about my finances and offering unsolicited advice. Each time, I gently but firmly redirected or set a boundary. "Mom, my budget is not a topic I'm comfortable discussing. I appreciate the suggestion, but I've already made a decision about that." By the end of our meeting, she looked exhausted, the effort of navigating our new dynamic clearly taxing. But as we prepared to part, she surprised me by saying, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Allison. I don't think I've said that enough." It was the first genuine compliment I could remember receiving from her in years. The most significant shift came at Thanksgiving, traditionally a fraught holiday in our family, filled with undercurrents of tension beneath the perfect table settings and Instagram-worthy dishes. I had declined my parents' invitation, planning instead to host a small Friendsgiving at my apartment with Ethan, Rachel, and a few close friends. The day before the holiday, a delivery arrived. My grandmother's china, which had always been promised to me someday, but had remained locked in my mother's cabinet for years after Grandma's death. The accompanying note read simply, "These belong with you. Happy Thanksgiving." It wasn't a grand gesture of reconciliation. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of all that had happened, but it was a symbol, a tangible recognition of my place in the family history, separate from the role I had been assigned in the family dynamic. That night, as I carefully washed each piece of the heirloom china, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the family dinner that had changed everything to this moment of setting my own table, making my own traditions, I had traversed a landscape of grief, anger, discovery, and finally, tentative healing. The relationships with my family members would never be what I had once hoped for. They would be more limited, more carefully bounded, defined by what was actually possible rather than what I wished could be. But within those limitations, there was a new authenticity that had never existed in our previous interactions. I had chosen option 3, neither accepting mistreatment nor cutting all ties, but rather creating a third path of limited, boundaried engagement on my own terms. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in my life, it was mine. Have you found ways to create new traditions after family upheaval? As I share the final part of my story, I'd love to hear how others have navigated the aftermath of setting difficult but necessary boundaries with family. 1 year to the day after that fateful family dinner, I stood in my new apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in hues of gold and pink. So much had changed in 12 months that it sometimes felt like I was living someone else's life, one with possibilities and freedoms I had never imagined for myself. My career at Rivera Marketing had continued to flourish, with clients specifically requesting me as their account manager. The promotion I had received 6 months in had come with a substantial raise, allowing me to move into this one-bedroom apartment with large windows and, most importantly, a door I could close, space that was entirely my own. The financial settlement from my parents had been fully paid, and the trust fund money carefully invested, giving me the security I had been working toward for so long. I had even started my own small side business, creating marketing materials for local nonprofits, work that fed my soul as much as my bank account. But the most significant changes weren't external. They were in the way I moved through the world, the boundaries I maintained, the relationships I cultivated. Therapy with Dr. Bennett had helped me recognize and begin dismantling the internal family system I carried within me, the critical parent voice that had continued my father's work even in his absence. "The work you've done this year is remarkable," Dr. Bennett had told me during our most recent session. "You've broken patterns that have persisted for generations in your family." My relationship with my parents had stabilized into what therapists call medium contact, not the complete estrangement I had initially thought necessary, but nowhere near the enmeshment they had always demanded. We spoke monthly, usually by phone, with clear topics and time limits. I visited for occasional dinners, always with an exit strategy, and often with Ethan as a buffer. My father's work with his men's group seemed to be creating slow but genuine change. He still struggled with direct apologies, but he had stopped making excuses for past behavior, a subtle but important shift. My mother vacillated between genuine efforts to respect my boundaries and reflexive attempts to cross them, but she caught herself more often than not these days. Rachel and I had developed a tentative friendship, meeting for coffee every few weeks, to gradually untangle the competitive dynamic our parents had fostered between us. She had started therapy herself, beginning the difficult work of discovering who she was outside of the golden child role. "I always thought you were so strong," she admitted during one of our conversations. "Even when we were kids, you never seemed to need their approval the way I did." "I needed it desperately," I corrected her. "I just learned early that I wasn't going to get it, so I stopped showing that I wanted it." These honest exchanges, painful as they sometimes were, had begun healing a relationship I had thought permanently damaged. Ethan had found his voice in his new city, excelling at his job and even starting to date seriously for the first time. Our monthly visits had become cherished traditions, opportunities to strengthen our sibling bond without our parents' interference. The extended family, initially divided over the conflict, had largely come to understand my perspective. Aunt Diane had become a particular source of support, sharing her own experiences and validating mine. Even those who maintained closer ties with my parents had begun to acknowledge the dysfunctional dynamics that had shaped our family for so long. My social circle had expanded beyond what I had thought possible during those isolated months living at my parents' house. Melissa remained a steadfast friend, but I had also connected with colleagues, neighbors, and members of a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and accepted, not for what I could do for others, but simply for who I was. Dating had been a slower process, my therapist encouraging me to take time to understand my own patterns before involving someone else. But 6 months after leaving my parents' house, I had met Daniel at a marketing conference. a graphic designer whose quiet confidence and genuine interest in others had immediately caught my attention. 4 months into our relationship, he continued to show me what healthy attachment looked like, respecting my boundaries and supporting my ongoing journey of self-discovery. As I prepared for the small housewarming gathering I was hosting that evening, I thought about how far I had come from that night when I had said those 4 words. I choose option 3. Option 3 hadn't been a single choice, but a series of choices, each building on the last. The choice to value my own well-being over family harmony. The choice to seek help and support rather than struggling alone. The choice to maintain boundaries even when it was painful. The choice to remain open to genuine change while protecting myself from further harm. The doorbell rang, announcing the first of my guests. Ethan stood there with a potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Happy anniversary of freedom," he said with a grin, hugging me tightly. As others arrived, Melissa, Rachel, tentatively, still finding her place in this new configuration, friends from work, and my support group, even Aunt Diane. I looked around at this chosen family I had built. These relationships weren't perfect. They had rough edges and growing pains. But they were real, in a way my family relationships had never been allowed to be. After dinner, as we sat in my small living room with coffee and dessert, Aunt Diane raised her cup in a toast. "To Allison," she said warmly, who had the courage to choose option 3, and in doing so, showed the rest of us it was possible. Later, after everyone had left, and I was alone again in my quiet apartment, I thought about the journey I had taken, from that confused, hurt young woman, sitting in a budget motel room, to the person I was now. The path hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks and difficult days, moments when I questioned everything. There would be more challenges ahead, more difficult conversations, more boundaries to maintain. But standing there in my own space, surrounded by evidence of the life I had built for myself, I knew that option 3 had been the right choice. Not just for me, but potentially for generations to come. By breaking the cycle of toxic family dynamics, I had created the possibility of something healthier, something truer, for any future family I might create or influence. I thought of something Dr. Bennett had said early in our work together. Healing happens in spirals, not straight lines. You'll revisit old wounds, but each time, from a slightly different perspective, with new tools and greater strength. That night, as I prepared for bed in my peaceful apartment, I felt gratitude for the spiral I was on, for the distance I had traveled, and for the continued journey ahead. I had chosen option 3, the creation of a life on my own terms, with relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. It wasn't the easiest path, but it was the truest one, and I would choose it again, every single day. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd truly appreciate you sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to create your own option 3 when faced with impossible family choices? Your experiences might help someone else who's struggling with similar issues. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about navigating difficult family dynamics and finding your own path to healing. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most courageous thing you can do. I'm grateful to each of you for listening, and I hope my experience has offered some comfort or clarity if you're on a similar path.